So welcome everyone to our food for thought this week, which is about building a global marketing influencer platform, Tailify, and we have Frederik here. I'm really pleased to see him again because we've known each other for a long time and we've been kind of in touch, but we haven't actually seen each other, have we? Face to face ish.
It's been a while, but I'm pleased to be back.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you back. So we'll come to this in a second. As usual, just to let you know what else is coming up. So we have webinars scheduled actually until the middle of December, all the way through. So we have one next week, which is a different topic. So this is one about finance, which my colleague Anish is going to lead. And then we have a really interesting one on the 4th of November, which is about reflections on the US presidential election, which should be really interesting with a political scientist and my colleague Andre. And then on the 11th of November, we have another webinar in what I call the little sub-series of finding our alumni who do really cool things in the entrepreneurial space. And we have an interview with Fikayo, who started a company called Kugali, which is an entertainment company that focuses on African stories. So that's what's coming up. But today we are talking about, and I'm really happy to do this, a marketing topic. So obviously, so I'm Caroline Wiertz. I'm a professor of marketing, which is why I get so excited about this. And we're here with Frederik, who is an alumnus of the business school. So maybe, Frederik, welcome first of all. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you are an alumnus of and what you have done basically after your studies, and most importantly, what Tailify actually is.
I'll try to wrap it up in a shorter format. But absolutely, I did my undergrad at CAS doing business studies. And I started that in 2010 and graduated in 2013. And absolutely, you're correct to say that I, foolishly enough, decided to do something completely different after graduating. And that was to start a company that at its time, I guess, was completely unheard of. If we would have done our research, most people would probably have advised us to find something different to do. But luckily enough, we didn't ask those people. So we decided to go for it instead. And that little company is Tailify, which is what we work with today.
Do you want to briefly say with whom you started that company?
Of course. Well, long story short, when I moved to London in 2010, I really didn't know anyone in London or based in the UK whatsoever. I'm from Sweden originally, and it was actually my first time in London the day that I moved there. So I hadn't been there before, I hadn't seen the school in real life, etc., etc. So everything was new to me. But luckily enough, I came across two people that I became very good friends with, both Scandinavians, another Swede and a Norwegian fella. We became very close friends. We actually moved in together in the second year of CAS. We shared a flat for the other 2 years at CAS. And after we graduated, we decided to start a company together.
And what is that company? So what is Tailify? What do you do?
Right. So Tailify, if you take it back, we have to remember this is 2013 when we started the company. So at the time, the concept of influencer marketing or even being an influencer wasn't as popular, I guess, as it is today. When you hear the word influencer today, I think that most people can relate in one way or another. But I guess to break it down to its most simple concept, we basically help different advertisers or brands to connect with influencers to do marketing campaigns together. So if you think about a brand like, say, for instance, Coca-Cola, they are looking for different ways of advertising their products. They could do TV, they could do paid social, and then a new route in the marketing world is to connect with someone that has loads of followers, hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, And we basically help those two parties to connect so they can work together. That was the very basic idea that we started Tailify on back in the days, but I think it has developed to something much, much bigger today. So if I take it back a little bit, I mean, I guess the way we see it is that we live in a sort of very cluttered world today. You know, brands are grabbing or fighting to grab your attention. And I think that most people can relate to, perhaps you're watching a YouTube video and suddenly in the middle of that video, it stops and there's a commercial break. And it's almost weird that, you know, there hasn't been more innovation in the advertising space, because that model is basically the same model that we've had in TV for the past 60 plus years. And so what I guess is unique about the influencer marketing is that you as the follower have already made a conscious decision saying that I admire or I look up to this person and I can relate to the values of that person, and that's why I want to follow him or her. And so what we do is basically that we just capitalize on an interest that every follower have already said that they have. So the most important thing in what we do as a company today is to make that connection between the brand and the influencer as relevant as possible for the followers and the audience.
And how does that connection actually work? Because I could imagine that, first of all, the question is, what is a good influencer, right? Because I know that there is a hot debate about the different types of metrics that you should be using. And I suppose one of the, and I'm going to be a bit mean about this, a little bit challenging, because one of the criticisms that has been leveled in particular at your industry is that there are no good metrics. You know, it's like we know that engagement per se is not necessarily a metric. So how do you actually really evaluate this? And influencer marketing has been called a little bit the Wild West of marketing, where a lot of brands just want to be part of it, but don't quite know how they should actually evaluate the success of a campaign. Because of course, if you're just selling an item, maybe that's easy. But if you're trying to do something else, if you try to achieve another marketing objective than just sales, it already starts getting a bit harder to actually evaluate those things. So I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit what your response to that is, because I'm certain that you have given this a lot of thought. And the second part is also a little bit how that match is made, right? So does the brand decide what type of influencers they're interested in? Is that a suggestion that you make based on their campaign objectives? Is there a self-selection mechanism from the influencers? So how does that actually work? So two questions, one about metrics and one about how you make the match, and they might be related, I guess.
Definitely. No, absolutely. And very relevant questions. I guess it's always been the problem in the market that, you know, it's this new shiny thing that went from, in all honesty, when we started the business in 2013, no one knew what an influencer was. Our biggest obstacle at the time was basically to explain the concept of being an influencer, and even in some cases having to explain what Instagram was. That's how early it was. So I think as you know, a market, an industry, it's come a very long way since then. But I'll tell you one thing which hopefully answers partly both of the questions. Now, the absolutely biggest problem in influencer marketing today is how you find the right influencers. Now, we've done a lot of research into this, and you could even take it as far as to saying that as a company, yes, we specialize in influencer marketing, but at the core of it, we are actually more of a data and psychology company. So the core of what we do is trying to understand why people do the things that they do, what they believe in, and what ultimately makes a person like someone or like a product. So part of the research we did, we actually found out that 92%, so that's 92% of influencer collaborations result in a negative ROI. So it's a very, very big number. So of all the different brands that work with, you know, thousands of influencers, 92% are actually negative, which means that you would be better off not working with those influencers at all.
Okay, so just to specify, ROI is return on investment, right? So that everybody is on board. So how did you work that out? I would be interested in how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, since we started Tailify, we have run tens of thousands of influencer activations. And an influencer activation is one influencer posting a picture, a marketing campaign, basically. And we've done tens of thousands of those. So we have a lot of data to look at, to analyze, and to draw different assumptions and conclusions based on. And so when we did that, we went back over time, and in addition to that, we also get a lot of data directly from our clients. So just as an example, one of the biggest clients we have, before we started working with them, they had already done about 750 different influence collaborations. And they were willing to share all of that data with us so that we could help them to make better decisions. So what I was about to come to, which is a very important thing, so that's 92% that result in a negative ROI. However, the other 8% often makes up for that, because those 8% can deliver up to 40 to 50 times ROI. So that basically means that even if 9 out of 10 doesn't pay your money back, the other 8% will basically make up for the 92%. So the big question in the market today is basically, how do you find those 8% and make that 8%, you know, 100% instead? And that's basically what we do at Tailify today. What we have built and what we do is basically a product, a artificial intelligence that help brands to find the most ROI friendly influencers for any given campaign for any given brand, which basically means that the promise we make to our clients is that we will always deliver ROI post campaigns.
Okay, that's pretty. That's quite a strong promise. So that's pretty impressive, and we need to have a conversation about that data at some point, which is probably
Absolutely.
a separate one. Let me ask. So I think we hopefully have a bit of an understanding of how influencer marketing works and what Tailify does. To the audience, if you have a question about that, then please put that in the Q&A function. I'll pick it up from there. But I think maybe also talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey that you've been through, right? So you said you're these three guys, you're good friends, you know, you actually don't really quite know what you were doing, but you had an idea at the time and you decided to run with it. So how did you actually grow this company? How big is Tailify right now? It's like, how many employees do you have? Are you profitable? How are you funded? How did you get that funding? So it's like, what is the journey that we're talking about since 2013?
I think partly to answer your question, I'll make this very short, but you know, the background for me at least is that I've always known in some way or form that I wanted to start a company. I just didn't know it would happen so soon, basically the day that we graduated. But I'm very glad I did. And you know, having two co-founders that were based in the same position, that helped a lot, because starting any type of business is honestly super difficult. You no matter what the business is, you will face 100 different problems. You will do 1,000 different mistakes. The only way that differentiates if you want successful entrepreneur from someone that ultimately have to close down is one that can find different ways to get through those mistakes and learn from them and improve things over time. So if I look back at the past 7 years at Tailify, you know, we have done hundreds of mistakes. In all honesty, we probably should have failed more than a couple of times. We ran out of money a bunch of different times. I've had to move back to my parents' house more than once. But at the end of the day, we had a very strong belief in what we did as a company. We had a very big passion for what we do as founders in the business. So over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, we've grown from basically just the three of us. We've had interns over the first couple of years, but it wasn't until basically 2016 that it started to take off. So over that time, we raised money from a few different investors. L'Oreal being one of them, a very big company in the marketing industry, is a publishing house called Axel Springer. We participated in Founders Factory, and we have a few other investors as well. So we've basically grown from, our parents' kitchen is the story I normally tell, to the company that it is today. And we're 50 people at Tailify today, spread across an office in London and an office in Sofia, Bulgaria as well.
And
but
in
today,
Bulgaria, you're mostly programming. Is that where the tech side sits, or everything sits in both?
No, that's correct. That's correct. We have development in Bulgaria. We decided there's many different ways of looking at how you want to structure a company like that. Some people decide to just outsource, but we actually went the extra mile to set up an office there, set up a company there. So, everyone works as one team and in the same company.
And do you hire marketing people in London? Like, are you always looking for new people, and are you open to past graduates to apply?
100%. I should know the stats of this, but we've had probably 5, 6, 7 people from CAS that have worked with us over the last couple of years. So yes, absolutely, we're more than open to that, and I will plug in here as well that we are hiring at the moment. So
good to know.
For applications.
That's always great to share. Thank you so much. Okay, so basically, it took you a long time to get started, right? Quick question on that. Do you think that was literally a timing issue, that by that time all the brands started to understand that influencer marketing is a thing, and you didn't have to fight that uphill struggle of actually getting people to kind of embrace the future? So in a way, you were almost ahead of your time. Was that the biggest building block, or was it more the fact that, as you said yourself, you didn't quite know yet what you were doing, you made a lot of mistakes? So how do you balance that, or is it a conflation of everything?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a combination of it. I think on one side, 2013 was probably 2 years too early. In all fairness, I think if we would have waited 2 years, we could probably have achieved the same things that we did in the past 5 years. So that's one thing of being too early. On the other hand side with that, we gained a lot of experience. We did a lot of collaborations. We learned, so much about the marketplace and influencer marketing and advertising in general, that I think it gave us a big advantage when it started to take off. The second point is absolutely true. We had zero experience from the advertising world. No one had worked in a media agency or worked in a marketing team before. So terms like CPM or cost per acquisition, all of that was completely new to us. So we had basically to learn all of that as well.
Okay. So actually it ties in with what Alexa is asking. She said, how did you actually get this business idea? And possibly also, how did you get it that as early as 2013 when it wasn't a big thing yet? Like, who had it? How did it come about?
It's a very good question. And actually it takes us back this is a true story, but it takes us back to CAS. Because it was the final year of our undergrad, and we did, we were studying for exams. We spent a lot of time basically at CAS in the actual building. And we did everything apart from what we were supposed to do, which was to study for final exams.
Don't say that.
We managed to squeeze in the study time as well. But the reality is that, we were basically browsing Instagram and Facebook and Tumblr and all of these different social networks. What we realized was that there are all of these people that have, built up a very big audience of hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, and they constantly talk about different brands. You see Nike in a picture, or you see Coca-Cola in a picture, but we can never see a sponsored ad. And so what we found was that there was no one basically making that connection between the influencer and the brand. And the way that we thought about it is that if you have 1 million followers, if you look at Sweden as a country, that's 10% of the population. It's a lot of people. If you have that many followers, then surely someone should be interested in actually advertising and paying you to be shown on your page. So that was the very basic, simple idea of how we came up with it. Who it was, you'll probably have to take us out for a beer and we'll fight over it. But at the end of the day, it was quite idea.
Okay, thank you. So there's a follow-up question, or a slightly different take on it, which is basically about the role of technology really in this, because you kind of said you didn't have an idea about marketing, but you probably also didn't have an idea about technology. And at the end of the day, this is tech business, right? It's like you probably would qualify yourself under ed tech as a rough category. So what is your advice to people who want to start, who are business school graduates, who probably don't have a tech background and who want to start a technology business? To what extent, how should they go about that? And the other question is also, to what extent is AI becoming important in your line of business?
Yeah. So start by answering the first question. Now, you're absolutely right. As I said, I think we've done hundreds of different mistakes. I think also it's the only way to actually learn. I think it's the only way to be successful in the end, because failing is just another step on the way to becoming successful. But one of the things that we didn't fully appreciate when we started Tailify was the concept of this being a technology business, because we were 3 business students. We had very similar background, experience, and know-how. But none of us had the tech experience and skills. And if we would do it all over again, I would strongly recommend to ourselves, our younger selves, and to anyone looking to build a tech company in the future, to find someone that can be a tech co-founder. Yes, you can hire someone. Yes, you can get someone further down the line, but it's increasingly more difficult to actually make it work, because that person will care as much as you do about making this work. So that's something I would do differently.
So how do you find them? How do you find, if you're a business student, how do you find the tech co-founder? What would be the of actually making those connections?
Yeah, I think this answer is, how do you find a problem tennis solution? And as an entrepreneur, honestly, you just have to hustle and grind and go the extra mile until you actually find that solution. In this very specific case, I mean, we were talking to friends of friends of friends, and we were going out for coffees. We took people out to lunch, and we were just very openly discussing the idea of Tailify. And I think that's another thing. You should never be scared about telling people if you have an idea, because people often just want to help, and for someone to actually copy and steal it, it's very, very unlikely. So just speak to people, and that was actually the way that we found our first tech hire. It was a friend of a friend, someone we spoke to about the business idea, and he said, "Oh, you should meet our friend Christo." And long story short, he came to work with us and built the first version of the platform.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a really good advice. First of all, a lot of students in particular are really afraid to discuss their ideas because they are worried that people might steal them. And I suppose it happens, but in rare cases, right? And I suppose the advice that I've always heard is that it really isn't about the idea, it's about the execution of the idea, right? So most likely other people will have had a similar idea, they just weren't able to execute on it. So indeed, it's like being open about it and actually talking to people is probably going to give you more value than this idea of hiding it and not talking to anyone. You're probably going to be suffering more from that choice than the other way around, right? So thanks for making that point, because that's always a discussion with the first-time entrepreneurs in particular. And also with
sorry, actually, if you can just be very clear on that, because I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that most entrepreneurs make. It's exactly that. They think that if I talk about my idea, someone will steal it. The reality is that the knowledge you sit on is very unique. Even if you tell someone what the idea is, it's only a very, very small part of everything that you know, how you want to do it, how you want to execute it. So talking to people will only give you feedback. The second thing, and you were spot on with that, Caroline, is the execution. If I look at Tailify back in 2013, we basically had one competitor, and that was in the US. 2 years later, there was probably 200 different companies doing influence marketing. But that never scared us off, because the way that we executed actually put us as the leading influence marketing platform in Europe, which was an award we won last year. And we can say that we are the biggest one today. So you should never be afraid of talking about an idea. You should always just focus on execution.
Great. Thanks for that, because that's what we keep telling everybody as well. So it's good to hear it also from an actual successful entrepreneur. Talking about execution, there's a question here from Edmund, who basically asks, how do you actually differentiate a high versus a low quality influencer? And is it just about things like likes, followers, it's like ratios of engagement and stuff like that? It's like, what actually makes a high quality influencer?
Well, there's loads of different aspects of this, and I think this will partly answer the question we had before about AI as well. So, with all of the research we've done, looking at hundreds of thousands of different influencer posts and digging into engagement and stuff like that, there's a wide range of different metrics. What we have found is that the most important metric when it comes to measuring the quality of an influencer, and not just the quality, but the actual match between a brand and influencer, is to look at values. And so values is basically what you stand for as a brand. Coca-Cola is all about life and enjoyment and being together with friends, etc., etc. Red Bull, for instance, you will think of them as being, adventurous and extreme sports and high energy and stuff like that. And so if you take the example of Red Bull, even if you find an influencer that might look like they have very good engagement, loads of followers, and someone that you think is a good influencer, if the values between the influencer and the brand, Red Bull in this case, doesn't match, then the result will simply not be good, because people don't trust that relationship. And influencer marketing is all about building trust. And that's why you have to look at the values and the values match between influencers and brands. So long story short, that's basically how what we incorporated into the product that we have today. And so what we look at is many different variables, but the most important one being values. And how does it relate to AI? So when we look at it, you have loads of different influencers. And as I said, 92% are often ROI negative. You have the 8%. It works is that we look at those 8%. We look at the attributes, the values, the engagement. There's 100 different metrics we look at. We plug it into our system, which basically makes these people so successful. And when we have done that, we can use our search engine, if you want. We have a database of influencers. And so we can use similar influencers with very similar attributes, values, and metrics. Okay, that's interesting. And that's the part that I guess is probably powered by AI, where you kind of make that match. Just a final question, because it's 30 minutes. But I actually have a follow-up question, because I'm a little bit confused as to the attributes of the influencer versus the attribute of the match, right? Being unique about certain influencers. So is it really just the fact that you have to make the right match between the brand and the influencer? I mean, I guess it's somehow both, but how are those weighted? Yeah. So there's, if you take the top 5, I guess, you have values, you have the actual cost, how much does it cost actions, you actually have a sentiment analysis, which looks at things like comments and how positive people are when they actually respond to an influencer's post. So what for the brands? We understand what values do they have, what are they trying to communicate, and in what way are they wanting to communicate that message? And we take what ways. And as long as you have what we have found so far is an 85% confidence level between the values or the match in the value % of the ROI positive influencers. So that really is the most important thing. So it's almost less about the influencer itself and how many followers they have or something, and it's most 100%. You could have an influencer with 100,000 followers that gives you less sales, less ROI than an influencer with, say, 10,000 followers. It kind of actually fits well with marketing theory.
which is also good to hear. Obviously, we have so much more to talk about. It's just such an interesting company, and lots of questions. So that means that we have to have you back as a guest lecturer. We can finally all be together again physically, since your office is actually literally around the corner from the business school, right? We need to make sure that you guys come over and give a guest lecture in person as soon as we're possible to do that. Frederick, thank you so much for your time. Thanks to the audience, and we really hope to welcome you back. And of course, we're super proud of you. It's always great to see our alumni doing so well, in particular when they're doing something in marketing, which makes me very happy. So thanks everyone, and good to see you. Thank you, Frederick.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.